Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Dave Rees. I'm the Managing Partner at Convergence. Great to have everybody with us. If you haven't joined us before, this is a series we're doing in conjunction with the University of Auckland, exploring some of the key changes and some of the shifts that have occurred in the business landscape over the last couple of years and looking at the impact on leadership. I think one of the major trends over the last few years has been organisations adopting agile work practices as a way to increase operational cadence, to become more customer-centric and empower decision-making among teams. We're delighted to have Heather Polglase and Victoria Lyons from Spark with us today, sharing insights about Spark's journey to adopt Agile and the experience of living with Agile over time. It's been a while now since they first adopted it. I'm particularly trying to get an HR perspective on that. Spark were the first large organisation in New Zealand, and I think the first telco globally to go all in on Agile. So who better to give us an introduction to what it means and how it can help improve organisational effectiveness and culture. Just before I introduce Heather and Victoria, a little bit of housekeeping. We are planned, I think, to run for 60 minutes in total. And the breakdown of that will be the first 45 will be with Heather and Victoria, and then we'll leave 15, 20 minutes or so for the Q&A at the end. The chat section is open, so really encourage you to put your questions in there as we go. These sessions are intended for us all to learn as we go, so all questions are valid, and we've limited the numbers on this just to try and encourage people to contribute their thoughts and their questions as we go. We've also got Felicity Lawrence with us from University of Auckland. I think she's going to curate some of the questions in the chat. And then lastly, if you can make sure you're on mute, I think pretty much everybody is. Obviously, Heather, we don't want you on mute, but everybody else, if you can click the mute button, that'd be awesome. So just in terms of introductions, both Heather and Victoria were, I think, very heavily involved in Spark's Agile transition, and they've continued their involvement in the ongoing evolution of the Agile model. Heather joined Spark back in 2013, and she's been the People and Culture Director since 2019. She's held various senior HR positions during her time at Spark and delivered a number of critical initiatives, including being a key architect of Spark's leadership development program to build high-performing teams and leaders. Victoria is a people and culture lead at Spark. She's got an extensive background in marketing and has been part of Spark's transformation journey over 10 years, including roles as Agile Tribe Lead and more recently as Agile Coach of Coaches. Now, if like me, those two titles don't mean a lot to you at this point, bear with us. All will be explained, I'm sure. So great to have you with us, Victoria and Heather. I'll hand over to you, and I'm really looking forward to the insights.
Thanks so much for the intro, David. Maybe just give me a thumbs up that all okay audio-wise. Cool, and then I'll just try and share our screen so we can get the logistics of Zoom out of the way. 1 second, everyone. Just give us a sec.
Yeah, no worries. You got major co-host, so you should be good to go on that.
You're having trouble?
It's just that we are avid Teams users, so we'll profess we are not the Zoom.
Well done.
I think we are good. All right.
Just put it on. Yeah, perfect. Gorgeous.
Perfect. Okay, so we are really delighted to, I guess, be with you all. I think I see someone on the call that I know too. So it's always nice to be thinking that you're talking to someone that you know. So Victoria or Vic, I can't call you Victoria with a straight face. I sound like Vic's mother. So Vic and I work really closely together, and actually Vic just recently agreed to be, I guess, my partner in crime here as the people experience lead, which is a really pivotal role in the next stage of our journey, like David said, from when we flipped to Agile in 2018 to where we are looking to go next. So we've included today a little bit of not just the background of what I guess got us here, being the Agile journey, but also what's going to get us over there. So a little bit of eyes up and out to once you move to Agile, what great fodder or grounds there is available for us to play in as a result of making that move. And we're going to share the talking, and we really hope that as we go through, please do use the chat to ask any questions or just thought starters or statements, doesn't really matter. That's just going to help us make sure the last 20 minutes are really compelling for you. And it is a small group, so it's a great chance to have a kōrero that is actually really meaningful around what you would like to understand more of. Don't be afraid by, I guess, the size of Spark. Sometimes when we're doing these, people are kind of like, oh, well, you would do that, wouldn't you? Because you've got 5,000 people. We'll hopefully dispel or bust a little bit of myth that size really matters, because it really doesn't. What we're talking about here is a fundamental paradigm shift in the world of work. And I was saying to someone the other day that really Agile, in whatever flavour or variant you choose to look at it through, will be the reason why people in the future will choose to belong or want to work for organisations, in my humble opinion, because it unlocks a lot of things that without moving to this way of working and way of being are just not possible for organisations to take. So if you're smaller or thinking about this from like even a small to medium enterprise vantage point, there's something in this for everyone, but we're also very mindful that there are flavours and variants to the journey and a lot of learnings that we'll share with you in a very humble, open way. So we'll kickstart into it rather than waste time on us. Here we go. So Vic's, I'm going to start, sorry, and then we'll hand to Vic. So for those of you who don't know Spark particularly well, we're often referred to, like David said, as a telco in New Zealand, one of New Zealand's leading telcos. We like to refer to it as one of the world's leading telcos, in terms of the fact that since 2013, we really have been going after, I guess, a purpose or a cause that's much bigger than us. And you can see our purpose here to help all of New Zealand win big in a digital world. So more often than not, we're referring to ourselves as, yes, there are telecommunications products and services that we provide to New Zealand, which are foundational, but we are moving to being a digital services provider that really helps bridge the divide and gap for all New Zealanders to be able to maximise, be that some of our, almost 1 million of our Kiwi friends and families that don't necessarily have equitable access to being able to operate in a digital world, all the way through to the other end in terms of multinational, multi-global organisations that we help to facilitate outcomes for their businesses. And we just include here, and don't worry, I'm not going to bore you, but this is really our plan on a page captured here in terms of where we're going, the values that underpin it, and the strategic pillars, which you can see. We're really proud that world-class capabilities and culture sits front and centre on the first page of our strategy or plan on a page. So it all starts with a good beginning or a burning platform, and ours started in 2013. And this quote is one of the ones where you kind of like don't want to look at it, and you definitely don't want to say it, but it's really important that we do keep reminding ourselves of this, because performance muscle, which we really pride ourselves on as an organisation now, was not ours to own back here in 2013. And we often call this the hairy-legged spider chart, because what it reflects or represents was all of our goals and ambitions coming off to the side each year. So it's eyes up and out, reset where we're going, what we're going to achieve. And then the other line, which was showing our actual performance. And I guess you can see the juncture at which we decided that being one of the poorest performers in a buoyant sector was not going to be our history. So it really did start back then, and this was, Vic was definitely part of the organisation then, so we all remember it with fond memories. And I joined just when we made this decision that this was not going to be our future. And so we embarked on really a 3-year turnaround program, but we decided, and this I guess is another muscle that was ours that's helped the Agile journey, we decided that boldness and execution in a rapid timeframe was the only way to go. So we worked with a partner, RTS, or part of McKinsey, on turning the business around, but that 3-year program we actually did in 18 months. And I guess this sort of set the tone and context for when we did flip at scale to Agile, that we knew it was possible, that we'd done it once before, and that actually we'd laid the foundations in terms of making sure we were lean enough, we were focused enough, we had enough performance and execution muscle, which we did through this turnaround. But it didn't actually change the facts out there. And like David said, that position of being a high-performing telco is not yours to own forever, given all of the headwinds that this sector is facing into. And I'm sure for all of you who've managed to fly your wings, stretch your wings and get out of town and see overseas, that all of that headwind that telcos face into often occurs when you look at the global platform and see that actually, our competitor set is no longer Vodafone. Our competitor set are hyperscalers, so globalization is really making it very challenging for telcos, hence why we have decided to have a bold move and step out into digital services. But what this really signaled to us after we'd done all of that heavy lifting was Agile became something of real interest to us, not because we wanted to have free love and empowerment on steroids, but because we actually knew that it could help us with, or we believed it could help us with that performance muscle we'd already built, and then enable us to achieve some outcomes, which Vic is going to talk to, which were our why. So I'll hand over to Vic.
Thanks, Heather, and morena, everyone. It's great to be here. But jumping straight in, we'll keep the flow going. So yeah, as Heather referred to, the next thing for us looking out of interest was this interest around the world and seeing more and more companies move to Agile. And so what did we do? We got on a plane, literally, clearly pre-COVID times, and took the leadership team and the board over to see a number of Agile organisations, both those that were similar to ours, that were legacy organisations or organisations that had been around for a while, and those that had flipped or started their journey was more the case, and then the Spotifys and that of the world who were set up in this way. And what those visits really shone through for us were 4 clear themes. And the first was being clear on our why. So it is a lot of work, and it still is a lot of work, and we're nearly 5 years in. So to be clear on really why you're wanting to do it, and we'll talk about our why in a second. How changeable is your organisation? So in the next slide, I'll share with you some of the transformation we've been on before moving to Agile. It's a lot of change, and it's still a lot of change for our people, quarter on quarter. And so what change have you been through in recent years? Agile will, as it says there, be 5 times that, I'd say at least. So, it's really is a shock to the system. And so how do you, set your organisation up, no matter what size, to be adapt for that change? And then really burn the boats. I like that saying, but, jump in with both feet. Yeah, there is risk of failure if you go halfway. And I think we've seen that with a lot of organisations we've spoken through since, and all those that stumble along the way. And I think our position of going all in across the business has been really beneficial in that respect. The last is don't lift and shift. So it's really easy to make excuses on the journey around shortcuts or things that you don't believe Agile will work. And look, even a couple of years in, there are probably some shortcuts we took that we're unwinding. So be bold and lift and shift. And so if we look at sort of our, if you go back to kind of that 2011, 2013 stage, there was a lot of transformation that back then Telecom and now Spark has gone through. Look, I won't step through it all, but I think you'll see there's some fundamental big shifts that our people had to go on through that. So if you go all the way back to 2011, that's when Chorus separated from us and we became a retail services provider. That on its own was massive, the amount of effort that went in from our people, but the shift of the workforce and that really important. We then went into a period of massive change in our systems. So we did a massive re-engineering and restack. That was a multi-year project and took a huge amount of heavy lifting, but was really fundamental in setting us up, moving off as many legacy systems as we could, although there's still a few hanging around, and getting us set up for what actually in hindsight now has worked really well for Agile. And then starting to step into sort of some growth areas too. You'll see, back in the day when we had Lightbox and the likes, and moving all the way through then to Agile at scale. And as we referred to at the start, we did go all in. We went really fast. I remember those days. There were some long nights, but we were really mindful and really clear with our people that we didn't have all the answers. And it was the start of a big learning journey and transformation. So what were our drivers for change? If you go back to some of those key things we learned on our visit to Europe was you've got to be really clear on the change. And so what was important for us? look, we had a lot of command and control. Heather can probably talk to this far better than I can, but there was a lot of hierarchy, a lot of approvals, a lot of handover points, as you'll see in that second point. And so things were really, really slow in a world where things were speeding up, and our competitors at that time were definitely faster than us on a lot of fronts. We had a knack for, well, to solve the problem, you just add people. So we just would keep adding people, and that in turn often caused inefficiencies. And I remember, my first days in marketing, walking around literally with a piece of paper getting sign off. I laugh at the thought of that now, because we are far, far, far away from that world. And we were very, very cautious. So I think right from sort of how we approached everything from the finance world to how we enabled our people, we definitely played it safe. And so if you flip that on its head, and this to our day is what this is our why for Agile. These are still our big three. The first was to embed customer focus. So to be relentlessly focused on what are our customers, no matter what customer that is, whether that's the residential customer in their house or, a government customer in B2B, be really laser focused on their needs and their changing needs and what's going to come next. The second is, and this is probably really exciting, I think the shift we've seen in this is engaged and empowered people. All of a sudden, and we'll talk through it in a bit, you remove this hierarchy and you treat everyone as, professional adults, and it's amazing what that power unleashes. And then faster to market. So actually, in the last few years, I've been in the product space, and it's been amazing to see actually the speed at which you can start to move things into market. So there are our big three whys. But I think one thing we always share when we're talking about Agile is no matter what you do or how you do it, the biggest thing is on changing the culture. And actually, a lot of Agile is not how it changes your work day to day or who you're working with, it's the mindset. And so I'm not going to go through all this point by point, but on the left, those were sort of some more of the attributes you would have seen in the telecom early Spark days. And we've definitely moved and continuing to really focus on building more of a culture around owning it. So, actually feeling really safe to get in and experiment and give it a go. And we're going to fail now and then, but actually that's okay if we put the proper boundaries around us and our people. Valuing every voice. Agile is great at this. So all of a sudden, the quiet people in the team that, got on and done a really solid job have so much to offer. And so how can you ensure that there's equal share of voice around the team and then across the teams, I think is really important. Empowering and coaching. So this is a big one, I think, in particular when you think about leaders and leadership, how do you move away from managing and seeking approval, asking for approval, to really empowering and coaching our people, right from our, directors all the way through. Actually, it's a big turning point, I think, and was a big turning point, but also a huge steep learning curve for a lot of our people. And then the last is team success. So actually what I love about Agile is it creates so many opportunities to make individuals and teams shine. It's really open and transparent. And then it's really a lot about being generous with your time for others. So those are the big things we focus on from change in our culture. So what do we look like? And as Heather said early on, it makes us, we are an organisation of about 5,000. But when you think about Agile, if you step right back, what Agile is designed to do is it's kind of designed to shake up what we originally have known work life to be. So if I go back to my early career and I think about being a marketer, I used to sit, in teams of often highly extroverted marketing people who, even early on as I was new in my career, I was sitting alongside really experienced people. And so what Agile does is really shakes that up. And so we've built, what we've focused on building is where possible, cross-functional teams. And so me as a marketer, I now sit in a squad of developers and testers and customer designers or whatever the right mix is for that customer outcome. And so you step back and you think, so how do you build an operating model around that? And I think we've got what we call sort of more Agile heavy areas of the business. And you can see on this slide, that's in our segment tribes, our product tribes, and some of our enabler tribes. And I'll talk through what a tribe is in a minute. But really what the operating model is designed to do is to what would you say, focus more on, you jump in.
Yeah, it's kind of taking divergent expertise that you might have in like functional areas, like Vic said, and either having them flow to work that needs to be done. So my centre of excellence in terms of people and culture would flow to the work that a product tribe needs doing. But within a tribe, it allows for you to bring all those divergent skills together on a converged outcome. So I guess it's really apt that David Convergence Partners is the sponsor of, but that's really what it does, is take divergence and functional silos and make them converge towards customer outcomes. Yeah. All right, this is me.
Go for it.
All right. So one of the things that David and Felicity were talking about with us was, well, that's all very well and good. Isn't that nice that you've got an operating model and you had a why and you've got a bit of a North Star? But how do you measure Agile success? And this is, as Vic said, these 3 whys have remained steadfastly important to us and have been built into the ways that we measure return on investment of the activities that we do. So when we decide on a priority, we ask ourselves, how does that priority for our customers actually achieve these 3 outcomes, or doesn't it? And then how do we measure it? This is just one example of one way we measure or assess where we are, and it's measuring Agile maturity. And this is a tool that we worked on initially with McKinsey, who were our partners. And then over time, we have morphed and sort of rescoped and exactly adapted this to actually work with us as our organisation has changed. But nonetheless, all of our down to squad level are regularly assessed through the Agile coaches that we have around how we're doing against these things and how do our people feel we're doing, not when we look at it and survey it, what do we think? This is about our people telling us. So you can see, when we first started, we picked a 0 to 5 scale just because we like to be simple people with complex problems every day, and we were around this 2.2. Now, when we went into that before that first measurement, which was about 4 or 5 months after we flipped, we anecdotally asked our people, where do you think we are? And I remember I sat through all of those workshops when I returned from mat leave, and all of our people said, I reckon on average we're about a 2. And so sure enough, the first assessment came through in a far more scientific way than my workshops at 2.2. And then you can see by the time we got almost, really a year on, we'd moved to 2.6. So we say, actually, we're about halfway, and we think that's about right. And when we looked at some of our external benchmarks, ING were a major use case study that we looked to through Europe, because they were a financial services and banking institution who were also quite legacy shrouded, not born digital like Spotify. So they were more similar to us. They needed to have that performance muscle, and they had a lot of heavy luggage to take with them. And actually what we achieved in that first year, it took them 3 years to achieve. So we were like, oh, I think we're onto something, and we should keep measuring and assessing and using that assessment to then have the continuous loop of Agile ways of working improvements. And so when we fast forward to where we are now, really, and Vic has been leading the coaching community, I guess through this, we're at 3.5, and we've got about 70% of all of our squads at 3.5 out of 5 or higher. So actually, we think we've reached a point of maturity overall, still with opportunities, where we've earned the right to take a more ahead enterprise level view on how agile are we across the whole of Spark, as well as dipping into, I guess, what will now become a hygiene measurement around where each squad is performing too. So when we look back on what sort of, got us to the point through all of that Agile flip, apart from being very clear about what we were measuring over time, this selling the story cannot be underestimated. Now, all of us, I'm sure, have worked with a change management model or theory or several of them and read lots of textbooks about change management, but we can't overstate enough how much communication and the relentlessness of that communication Agile required of the lead team and of tribe leads, which at the time, Vic would be testimony to this because you were a front runner tribe where we experimented with 3 tribes just to test and learn. So we went out and did something quite different to our perfectionistic nature as an engineering type culture, because of course engineers like to think in chains. For those of you who haven't worked with engineers, that if there's a chain and there's a link missing, it's no longer a chain to an engineer. It's just a series of loops. Whereas if you're a marketer or a people and culture person, you generally think in jigsaws. So you're like, oh, there's one piece of the jigsaw missing, but I can tell it's a red fire engine. Like, I'm good with that. What we had to do is take the organization on a journey to say, actually, this is a jigsaw and there are some pieces missing. And we're all going to have to be okay with that, but we'll be really honest with the storytelling around this bit we know, this bit we're figuring out. And we just kept that relentlessness of lots of mediums and communication types, but with this very, like Vic said before, adult to adult focus, but with a stringent methodology of we will communicate this every 2 weeks, this every week, this every 4 weeks. We also captured hype reels, really what they became, of real life video footage. So as things were unfolding, we had a videographer following teams around. It wasn't freaky or creepy, but it was just trying to capture the essence or the heart, because we knew that a lot of organizations would want to understand the real oil. They didn't want all of the gloss and, oh, it's all amazing. They wanted to know, like, can you show us and tell us about when your people were struggling? And so video was one way we could bring that to life for ourselves and others.
Got me to jump in. So you might be thinking, okay, so what does an agile team actually look like? So I'm going to try and bring this to life. It's really hard in 30 seconds, but I'll do my best. So here you can see what we call at Spark a tribe, and there's many other terms for that around the world. But a tribe is essentially a team who are focused on a particular outcome. So I'll use an example of a previous team I used to look after. So I used to sit in the product space. So we were responsible for, designing, building and maintaining new products. So why don't we take broadband and Spark's instance that's relatable for all of us as an example. So broadband may have been a tribe, and within that tribe you may have multiple squads, and you can see there those are the verticals. So in this instance there's 4 or 5 different squads, and a squad is responsible for a certain outcome. It's often a cross-functional group of specialists. So as we said before, it might be a mix of skills, but they're really focused, laser focused on outcomes. So in a broadband case, one squad might be responsible for the plans that show up across broadband, whether that's fiber or wireless or copper. You might have another squad that is responsible, for example, in terms of operations, making sure that your broadband connection is always on as expected. And then within each of those squads, you'll see there the horizontals, and the horizontals are our chapters. And a chapter is really a term for your craft. So chapter 1 may have been, we keep using this example a lot, marketing. Chapter 2, for example, might be a customer experience expert. You might have a developer or several developers in there. You might have a tester. And each squad makeup is slightly different depending on what mix of skills you really need to be self-sufficient and self-organizing. And that can change over time. So now and then a squad may have one person come and go because actually those skill sets that you need change. I think that covers it.
We're never going to do that. It was a great job, but we're never going to do the actual structural side justice in a webinar, but we can always come back for more. But like Vic said, it is really about putting different skills together in one place and then them working on priorities as well as their craft. So these are kind of some interesting stats or measurements or things that happened, which I think is quite mind-blowing. And these are numbers I like to look at, actually, more than some of the other ones. So we really de-layered. This is what Agile does. So we went, in some cases, from 9 layers, from leadership team or the executive team out to frontline facing customers, to 3. So now the organisation is very flat. Now there's some real positives that come with that. Like we said, engaged and empowered employees, people not necessarily seeking permission up the ladder, but being allowed to get on with it. There's also some hard things, which I'm sure if you're a people and culture expert, how do you manage progression in a world where people still want to know what's the next promotion? Not everyone, and this is changing with the generations coming through. But how do you manage progression in a meaningful way when you've got a much flatter organisation? Anyway, I still maintain it's a good problem to have, and causes, it creates a situation where it gives me good challenge, and that's what motivates me around how do we do that. We moved from having 1,700 discrete job titles. So if you think about 5,000 people, I mean, those were the most underutilised fields that you could possibly get on a ratio basis in any HR information system, to 120 job titles. And this is something we look at from time to time, as well as the layers, because with Agile, it's it's going against the grain a lot, which is why a lot of organizations choose not to go here, because it just doesn't make sense in accordance with when you look at your current state. So just when you think everything's good and you're not looking, you know, I can guarantee you 120 job titles will creep back in, or another 3 layers. So these are measures we have to look at all the time to say, are we designing for the most positive future for the organisation we can? We had 118 squads. I think there's quite a few more than that now, and that obviously fluctuates on the basis of priorities and objectives. But we've actually, more interestingly, moved quite a few more squads. I think we had 50 more squads move into an agile heavy construct, which basically shows you that that way of working really works, because we had some squads that were more light in their adoption of agile that then moved into heavy. We radically transformed the whole kind of like what we call the backbone infrastructure. So moving to this 90-day quarterly cycle where, and you know, the best way to give it legs is actually use our own situation. So as a lead team in people and culture, we sit around at the start of the quarter and we say, right, what are we locking in and being accountable for delivering over the next 90 days? That's been a really hard shift for particularly, I'd say, functions like people and culture, where you're a lot of the times building infrastructure for the business or services that wouldn't be done in a 90-day period. So you have to really discipline yourself saying, what specifically about a big thing are you literally going to deliver and hold yourself accountable to in a 90-day cycle? And the whole organisation works on this quarterly cycle now, which is quite a machine, and actually something to be, you know, when you're not in it, you'd kind of go, wow, what's that about? And then these sprints rhythms that the particularly the agile heavy, a 2-week operating rhythm where you're kind of working on, when you break that down, 2 weeks, what are you going to deliver? Yeah. We had to build our own agile coaching capability. These roles, agile coaches, are pivotal in being able to move to agile. There are a number of agile coaches out there in the market in consulting type capacity, etc. Now, when we started, really there was not a massive offering, and so we looked at what was available, and we looked at, there was quite a large variance in terms of what great looked like and what maybe more average might have looked like, and we said, right, you know what we'll do, we'll build our own. So we had a few experts that we used from McKinsey and external, and then that specialist skill enabled us to actually train our own agile coaches, and that's something we still do to this day. This was when we launched, we went into massive boot camp, agile boot camp, which is a really big part of our communication and engagement approach to launching this. And then the top team in the driver's seat, that sounds quite condescending now, actually, I might need to change that tone. But really every week as a lead team, it's actually now 4.5 hours that we spend together, really being very clear about how all these component parts of Agile are working and are the priorities in the right place. And this is just, I guess, an indication of how that works, because it sounds very nice that if you looked at it bottom up, you know, oh, the squads are all busy, all 118 of them are busy building their backlogs. How does that relate to the strategy? Well, actually, we have our strategy, just like any organisation does. And then from that strategy, which is the 3-year one, we establish the quarterly priorities that will deliver that from a lead team point of view. That then feeds down into each tribe or channel or people and culture, surfacing up their quarterly plan, and so the two speak to each other, and then down into the objectives and key results that every tribe will set, and then all the way down into the squads. So everything is working in unison or cohesion back up to the strategy and then back down to the backlogs. The kind of reset in HR, which Dave touched on at the beginning, was probably one of the most fundamental, I don't say that just because I run HR, but one of the most fundamental parts of how we got there. And like most organisations that I know, we were no different. We had a myriad of different incentive structures. In finance, we had all sorts of budgeting requirements and expectations. We've talked about the titles and layers. But if you think about it like this, all of those headwinds from the market, and then we create these sort of almost pipes that you have to navigate through, that's a bit more like a maze, that slows the whole flow to outcomes or outputs down. And so this was something where we actually said, we've got to fundamentally reset a lot of the work that the centres of excellence support the business to deliver the customer outcomes through. And we essentially did a bit more of this. So in some cases, if I use incentives, that's a really good one. We had not heaps and heaps, because we'd already done quite a lot of cleanup, but we definitely had a few too many, and we had some people that probably shouldn't have been on short-term incentives. So we did a massive cleanup and we said, you can't have a squad of 9, let's say there's 9 or 8, and have all of those 9 on a different kind of remuneration package and expect them to be engaged and empowered with each other, because all of that difference doesn't add up to consistency. So we made some really conscious decisions about what inclusion was going to look like when you thought about something like incentives. Now, to Vic's earlier point, was that really hard? Yeah, it was really bloody hard. And probably these things to do with remuneration and agreements took us a lot more time than anyone would have wanted to think. So we kind of did another bold move. We said, well, if we're going all in at scale, then we're going to issue brand new employment agreements to everyone. And we used a sounding board from across our business to come together to say, what do you think of this Agile employment agreement? This got quite a lot of attention when we first did it, but not from the perspective of, you know, what people might think, like everybody's leaving. In fact, very few people did not choose to sign up to this whole coming aboard the Agile infrastructure, really. And it kind of took us by a little bit by surprise. We thought we might have had more noise, but we basically removed one of these things on here. We no longer write job descriptions, which essentially can be an industry in any organisation. So in every employment agreement, if you're, say, a tribe lead or a chapter lead, just the key roles that we have, remembering we've got a few less, there's 5 bullet points inside the agreement that essentially encapsulates the essence of why that role exists and what its why is. Still me, isn't it?
Yeah, you're doing so well.
I'm doing so well. This was another massive piece of work. So like a lot of organisations, we had broadbands off to the left. So very wide ranging bands of remuneration, which you could basically make a whole host of different decisions very subjectively. And that was our strategy. And then obviously the market guided our approach, which was we picked median and then we went plus or minus 20% of that. What we needed to move to with Agile was what we call here staircases. So we went to market again. It's all market data based. And we said, well, we need 5 steps really. And I'll show you the contribution model that underpins this. And we need to set market REM within each of these steps, excuse me, which basically then makes it very objective and removes any pay disparity issue, not from a median pay point of view, but from an equal pay for equal role type. So let's say I was going to market and I needed a marketer at step 3. These pay points would be available to me, related to some descriptors of what you're essentially buying from the market. And even if I came along as a candidate and said, oh no, I only want 20,000 less than that, you're still picking the pay point that is related to that role, so that we don't get any of this. If you're a better negotiator, you can get a better deal, which is important for our diversity and inclusion. And then this is how we basically guide those steps. You see them across the top. Those are the competence levels. And within that, there are descriptors of what that looks like when it comes to the craft that you have. So your marketing craft, it will describe what your outcomes are against those steps. And everyone in the business has the same people mindsets and customer business descriptors, so that we get real consistency of our culture and behaviour across the board. That's an example of one. There are over 90 of these, and it took us about 3 months to write those in a co-creation way with our people.
I'll just jump in quick. I'm really conscious of time because we want to allow lots of questions. But as Heather said before, you know, we really went in knowing we needed to build our own Agile coach capability. And so we did exactly that. We had people from across the business who were lawyers, business analysts, you name it. We had a really good mix of 40 odd coaches come in, and we built that capability and coached them and grew that talent from within. I won't go through all the criteria, it's there, but I think what's important is we're continuing to do that and we're continuing to build. And what's awesome is when you start to talk to other New Zealand businesses, they're looking to us for support in this space, which is really exciting. Transparency and measurement, also important. So we didn't want to do, when I talk about this, I say we wanted to do Agile for adults. And so, you know, we've talked about our performance muscle. And so jumping in, it was really important that we still ensured that we were measuring and sharing that information not only with the market at relevant times, but also with our people. So, you know, if you go back to one of our whys around empowered people, We track our EMPS regularly. You can see there pre-Agile we're at 32, 1 year into Agile 41, and at the end of 2021 we were at plus 70, and that's continuing to grow. So it's really exciting. I think our people love being here, and we can talk about that a little bit more in future slides. I'm going to go really quickly because I'm really conscious of time.
I think we can actually send the learnings to you all. And then just wanted to touch on very briefly in the last sort of 3 minutes, and then we'll hand to questions. There are a few things, as I said at the beginning, that going Agile then allowed or gave us license to move on. So a big thing, and this is a whole nother webinar in its own, but I guess our diversity and inclusion journey, we've learned a lot about ourselves and about New Zealand, and we continue to learn. So this is something we love sharing and talking about to get other people and other organisations' views on. But really what we did was we had a Blue Heart organic movement. More recently, we've applied a really strong data and insight lens and getting really clear on standards and goals around gender, around ethnicity, and what we expect the composition of our organisation to look like over time. And then really moving into what we call cultural contribution versus culture fit. So if I hear anyone come out of an interview and say, I'm just not sure if they'll fit with our culture, I go cold, because really that's a way of saying, like, do people fit in with us versus saying, how do other people different to me meaningfully contribute to our culture? And that's what's going to get us the inclusion outcomes. One of the big levers, and COVID did not create this per se, but COVID gave me cause, and it's exacerbated the cause, I guess. And this is like another one of, I guess, my babies. I love this. This is about normalizing and destigmatizing wellbeing and making it not an HR thing and making it a performance lever. So Mahi Tahi is our framework, is going really well, and we've been able to do some really cool, bolder interventions, like I've brought on 2 psychs onto our staff to provide services for our people to actually visit a specialist psychologist to actually work on their mind health or their life. And we've also trained our own Mahi Tahi coaches and had them accredited by registered psychologists to provide frontline or first tier support to our people. And then when we look ahead, just finally, we're now saying, well, most people would say, how would you describe Spark's culture? The words that people would use would be, it's agile, it's fast, and it's performance led. And that's true. And we're really now thinking in our next roadmap, so over the next 3 years as we build that, about how we unlock what I'd call big G growth. So in order to unlock big G growth, we're going to have to take the amazingness that Agile gives us as an infrastructure, which is the blue circles you see on this, all of those amazing ceremonies, events, and ways of working and disciplines, and then front end it with even more customer ideation and employee co-creation. And that would basically move us even further down the dial in terms of this willingness to experiment. And some people would call it test and learn, others would call it willingness to fail. You can call it whatever you like, but how do we basically go performance, muscle, agile ways of working, and then innovation is where we're headed next. And in closing, that's been a really key lead on our Tomorrow program. So we've embarked on a cultural evolution program. So I guess we're going again. First it was Agile, and now we're going again towards innovation. We've just completed a big listening exercise. We had 90% of our people participate, which is incredible. We've got a 67% engagement rate, which is top quartile New Zealand, but we want to head to top decile New Zealand, which would be plus 81 from an engagement point of view. And this is now unfolding and being unpacked with bottom-up ideation from our teams, which I guess Agile has given us license to allow people to know that that's the normal. So that is
that's really exciting, Heather and Vic, I have to say. Very exciting to see this. Just reflecting, I'm looking at some of the questions, but I was actually, trying to sort of work out from all of that what actually happens on a day-to-day basis. So Dave has actually asked that question, but it's like it's hard to get a sense of, okay, how different is that work? So just maybe a typical day in a squad or a sort of, something of that nature would be great.
Yeah, great question. And like a typical day is really focused on what's the outcome. So, we've talked about cross-functional teams coming together. Each of those teams have a backlog. So actually, what is it that we're wanting work through, and they chunk the backlog up really shortly. So a 2-week a squad will run in a 2-week sprint that starts the first day of the first of the 2 weeks is sprint planning. So they'll take that backlog and they'll say, okay, over this 2 weeks, what work do we want to pull into the sprint? What do we want to do? They'll then, partway through that sprint, halfway through, they'll refine. So they'll look at their capacity. If you think there's 6 people in the squad, most of them have, I don't know, 80% of their time across that 2 weeks to spend on this work. How much will they be able to pull through? And so halfway through that sprint, they'll look at the work they've done and go, actually, we can pull more in. We've been more efficient, or we've been able to get through things faster, and so they'll pull some more work in. And then as they close out the sprint, at the end of the sprint, they'll do a sprint review. And as a tribe lead, this was always my most favorite time of the sprint because it's super energizing. It's not in many working worlds do you get to see everyone in a squad share the work they've done over the past 2 weeks, and everyone has a voice in that. And so it's really uplifting to see that and to challenge it and to build on it. And then we close off a sprint with a retrospective. And that's really an opportunity for the squad to safely come together with their Agile coaching. And this is the ways of working piece, and go, what worked, what didn't work, what do we want to change, and what's that one action we want to take forward for that next sprint. But they're still delivering on outcomes, right? So if I go back to that broadband example, a broadband squad would still be looking at, the market. Is it competitive? Are our plans competitive? What are competitors doing? Tweaking those plans. But because they've got that right mix of people, they're not having to hand the work off to the next team, from the product team to the technology team to the marketing team. Actually, they've got everything they need in that one team, and so end to end can own that.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it's not really any different to working in a high-performing team. There are definitely some events and ceremonies that are Agile-based, but it's no different to a high-performing team, in so much as in a high-performing team, everyone would know what work that they were doing, they would be sharing it, they would be held accountable for it. All Agile does is actually put the rigor and discipline around that, more than just a belief set that it's for software engineers. I mean, sure, the manifesto for Agile came out of software engineering because it lends itself well to writing code, but it lends itself well to any outputs from a customer that require all those divergent skills to come together and not hand off or wait. So I guess it also removes hope as being your strategy, that the marketing team will get to it. I hope ours rises to the top because Vic likes me. She's going to do my work. You no longer have to wait for that and hope. And that's why you get the engaged, empowered tick up. I saw, Felicity, someone just asked, what about BAU work? Everything is allocated a utilization percentage down to one-on-one times that need to occur. So say you're a chapter lead, you're working on your craft. So you might be a chapter lead for marketing, but you are also in a squad contributing your craft, and you look after the craft development of, let's say, 10 other marketing people. So in your allocation of time, if it's 100% that you have, not 150, then 20% of that sprint might be dedicated to one-on-ones. And that would be allocated out when the squad comes together to decide what are we capable of delivering.
What about if it's like a finance function or maybe a contact center where it's sort of more task-based, less project-based? How do those processes map across?
Yeah, so not all, so let's say not only contact center or like ticket issuing type. So there's a customer issue that comes into a contact center, you've got to deal with it. You do not pull a 2-week sprint together to deal with that kind of work. That would just be stupid. That's a little bit I was saying to Dave last night, like coaching and empowering. If someone's having a heart attack, you don't sit around and go, who would like to deal with this? If you're a leader, you act and respond. So Agile is no different in that you have to pick your flavor of variant in accordance with what the customer demand is. So the way that contact centers and stores work is they've adopted all of the Agile behaviors, mindset, understanding, education. They know how to work in with that whole quarterly business review cycle. All of the prioritization happens. How they work day to day in terms of a customer query comes in is in the same way that they would respond to that in the moment. Our sales teams, though, if they've got customers that account like businesses that they support, they will have chapters where they share that knowledge and craft in a very Agile-esque way. So we've just been really clear around where is 2-week sprints, where do they work? And that's the bulk of our squads. So over 100 squads working in that way. And where does the Agile light, we call it, which has not been that helpful, because then you get haves and have-nots. Like, why are we Agile light and they're Agile heavy? Or, you know, we're not really Agile because we're light, which is not true. So that's what Vic said. We've learned a lot around language or words that we've used to sort of mitigate some of that on the way through.
It's obviously been quite a while since you guys first implemented this, and I'm sure, you know, there's been a huge evolution over time. But, you know, given the sort of turbulence of COVID and, you know, hybrid working and all of the stuff that's come out of that, how has that impacted the way that you work within an Agile model?
You go.
Yeah, I think like at a squad level, when we first moved to Agile, we were reasonably strict, maybe not quite the right term, of trying to get as many of our squads, you know, in the same area, same location, sitting together physically. And it's this whole collaboration works far greater when you're all around the table. You know, we even changed our property look and feel, took out all the dividers on the tables and the likes, had whiteboards everywhere. Luckily, we learned that wasn't pre-COVID, particularly long term. So actually we have people across the country, so we weren't always going to be able to form squads in one location. And secondly, digital was going to work far faster for us in terms of our tooling. And so look, I think moving into COVID, we're pretty lucky. Our squads had already been working. We already had the tooling, the digital tooling, whether that was Microsoft Teams or, you know, we use Azure DevOps from a Microsoft perspective in terms of capturing all our work. So I think, you know, we had what was needed, but I think what we like the rest of, I was going to say New Zealand, probably the world, it was the culture shift, the way I connect, the way I contact other teams and dependencies was a really big learning opportunity for us, I think.
And the way that we could swarm. So there were a number of organisations that I guess for COVID, it was a catalyst to move to Agile, because when maybe a strategy in an industry like airlines just does not work in COVID, right? You gotta pivot. What Agile allows you to do is identify the squad or the tribe that can pivot, and you rework that. You've got all the right people in the right ways, with, to Vic's point, all the correct ways of working to enable that movement at pace, versus other organisations that were perhaps still functional or siloed. Imagine trying to regroup your strategy, you know, in a couple of days to be able to respond with immediacy. So we were, I mean, lucky, or skilled, whichever one you want to call it, that we were there. What we did do was very quickly identify virtual collaboration and facilitation tools were going to be our new normal. And the Agile coaches did a remarkable job of standing up all of the events and ceremonies that we used to do in person in a virtual way, to the point that actually we could get more people actively engaged and interested in big room planning or, you know, tribe showcases around what we're doing, because more people had access to it through the virtual tools than could maybe do it in person. So we've only been able to bust the myth that co-location is the only way to do Agile. That was the original belief. But what I would say is, if you've got complex problems to solve for customers, knowing when virtual is the way, this is knowing when to bring people into a physical environment is really important. And we still maintain that a blend of both of those things is the way to go.
You mentioned about Teams there, which I guess is pretty ubiquitous now, Teams or Zoom or whatever people use. But did the transition require investment in other sort of tech enablers beyond comms tools?
The only other one probably that if you put an Agile lens on that question, that we were using, but we probably a wider population of the business wanted to use, was Miro. And that's kind of really like a whiteboarding. I'm sure many of you have used it. There's many other options, but it's a really great collaboration tool for brainstorming, workshopping, post-it noting digitally in quite a clever way. I think for us, that and the use of sort of breakout rooms and teams were probably the gold that enabled us to keep our customer focus and all that greatness you get from workshopping collaboratively.
It was actually more an investment in human augmentation of that. So we put a number of our people through facilitation with impact. I don't know if anyone's used Gabrielle Dolan, but, you know, she'd be one of the most remarkable storytellers and online facilitators of large groups of people that I've seen in action. So we actually went to her and said, can you help us so that we can and help people feel confident and build new capabilities to use these tools. So we did more of that, but it has given us pause. To Vic's point, we've added software bolt-ons that we've needed to. And we've also, when I look at Spark Gigs, which is our new digital talent marketplace, what COVID has done is just fast track something we wanted to do, because if we're not seeing people physically as much, and we never were seeing our frontline team, which is the problem, right, with tracking frontline teams through organisations into specialist roles, then you have to have a way for them to access progression and pathways digitally. So it has those sorts of investments, particularly that's where my focus is how do you have incredible digital experience for people to have access to learning and pathways, but augment them with some incredible human moments where they get the coaching and the skills and etc.
Just lastly, before we finish up, I just wanted to touch on sort of leadership transition, because it's such a different way of leading teams. And I'm sure, some people adapt very quickly to that and other people maybe not so much. But how has that transition been, and how does it impact talent acquisition? And when you're looking now to bring on new leaders, what are some of the core behaviours and competencies that you look for now?
Yeah. Maybe I'll give a couple of enterprise things, and then I know Vic will have a couple of from in the tribe. So I think those are even more important. We had a saying when we moved to Agile, rightly or wrongly, that this was not going to be an exercise in putting old wine into new bottles. Now, let me qualify that, because it doesn't sound, who does put old wine? Well, some restaurants do that. You can tell. But essentially, we went, for this to be really transformative, it does take a totally different leadership capability and set of traits. Now, some leaders, like all of us here, are highly adaptive, and we will, adapt quickly if given the tools by which to make that journey. And that's a good thing. So we looked at it in thirds. So we said 30% of our new roles in Agile will most likely be filled by people who have the craft excellence. I'll give an example. You're not going to put a graduate in charge of running the network operations because you think it could be a good idea. So we had 30% of our people that were absolutely the experts in the core foundational elements of keeping this business going. Then we said another 30%, we want to be really great leadership ideas, just slightly ahead of their time. So we can see the latent or nascent potential is like really close to the surface. We can give those people a shot in these roles. And then we said, and 30%, we're going to say great ideas really well ahead of their time. And that's how we thought about leadership placement. And we also took the opportunity to put a DE&I lens across it. And we really intentionally and purposefully went out and said, we know there's incredible female talent in technology. We need to surface that now. So we seek to understand people from different lenses. From an external market point of view, the biggest lesson or insight that I still have to this day is collaboration has become so easy to say, and people can spell it forwards and backwards, but we still struggle to find people in the market who really, really understand how to do that, and how to do that from a leadership point of view, both playing with their own people or tribe and playing across the company. So managing this place like a system through collaborating really well is a really hard thing to do. So if any of you know people who are exceptional collaborators, we're always looking. And what that's meant was a serious investment. So about 3.5 million every year I dedicate to leadership development, and it's all based around adaptive leadership. So that constantly shifting and morphing. It's not about creating a program where people go and learn how to be agile. In fact, we very rarely use the word agile in there, but it is all about the adaptivity gene and muscle that all leaders need to have to make this ambiguity that we face into work.
And then all I'll add, because I know we're probably out of time, was that's entirely it for a leader. So successful teams moving to Agile, the ones that can move faster, are those that have leaders that can look inward a lot more. It was a massive journey for a lot of leaders. Some got there a lot faster than others, but there's a lot of inward looking and going, am I empowering and coaching? Have I really stepped back from being a manager, left that, and is every conversation I'm having coaching, not telling and empowering, and trusting your people? I think that was probably the big two for me as a leader. but I'm conscious of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think we could probably spend another couple of hours kind of peppering, questions through with this, but it's always our ambition to start and finish on time. So thanks everybody for making the time. Special thanks to Heather and Victoria. That's been really insightful, really thought-provoking. Hope you enjoyed the session, everybody. I think we'll get the recording out over the next few days. And with that, I'll leave you all to get on with the rest of your days. But thanks again, Heather. Thanks, Vic. That's been awesome.
Thanks so much.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for listening.
See you later.
See you.
Bye.